Welcome to the Crack House Chronicles, your favorite true crime podcast. I am Donnie, and with me is a man who is not going outside again until the temperature reaches his age. That's Dale.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I like that.
He's not going out there. He does not like the cold at all.
I do not. I hate it.
And we are under a cold streak here in North Carolina.
You can have it.
Yeah. I mean, it's the nights. I mean, they've been down in the low teens, man.
Yeah, I don't like it. No, me no like.
No, you have to go out in the morning and crank up the truck, or you can crank your truck from inside the house. So
that's right.
Yeah, let it warm up.
Lordy be.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they say, I don't think you should come in till it warms up a little bit. I'm like, okay, I'll see you in June. Don't tell me that.
Yeah. Not coming in until I get the pool opened up.
When it's pool 30, we'll roll on in.
Yeah.
Till then, I'm sitting in the house with 6 shirts and a pair of pants on.
Yeah.
Pair of shorts.
Your wife freezing you to death.
Yeah, put your coat on to go in the house. Now it's just the same damn thing.
I'm going to put this stuff outside so it won't freeze.
So, yeah. Somebody said the other day, "What, are you not cold wearing shorts?" I'm like, well, no, really. I got 2 shirts, a hoodie, and my shorts on. I'm good.
Yeah. Somebody asked me if I'm cold. I said, no, I just got on thick shorts, so I'm good.
Yeah, we wear shorts about every day, right?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. Unless I'm going to be out for a while, I'll put on pants. But
depending on what you do.
I mean, I'm going somewhere. I get in the car to go somewhere. I'm not going to be out there. I'm going in somewhere.
Right. Yeah, if you're going to stand outside for 3 or 4 hours,
that's different.
That's
yeah.
different.
Yeah. What's going on today, dude?
You know, same old, man.
Same old. Rocking and rolling.
Ready to rock and roll.
You got anybody you want to talk about or mention before we get going, dude?
Well, I do have a little, I don't want to say slight shout out, but it's not like a 5-star thing, but it's just a appreciation shout out. How about that?
We like appreciation shout outs.
Yeah, we'll get one of them. And I want to, holler out to our friend, Michelle Rosen. You know, she came on as a guest and we've become friends, and I think she's a fan of the show and we're big fans of hers. But anyway, she, after last week's, I think it was the last week, 247, the Shaughnessy family.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, after that came out, she messaged us to let us know that a lot of those houses, I had said something, back up a little bit. I had said something about, me and my daughter looking at, the houses and the rock work and all that, because we were just thinking it was like a neighborhood that in your mind, you just think of a bunch of similar houses down the road. When it wasn't like that at all. It was like a really nice house off with a lot of rock work. And we just was wondering how you get that confused. So she hit us up and told us that lots of places out there have a lot of rock work and that kind of thing. She said, what did she say? Like, we have like 2 inches of soil and then it's all rock, so we have plenty of
limestone in that
plenty
in that
of
area
rock to work with.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to say we appreciate people giving us insight like that and hollering at us and giving us a little straightening up when we need it. So
yeah, we interviewed Michelle Rosen from the Tylenol murders, and she has become a friend of the show and a friend to us, and it's just awesome.
Yeah, just awesome person, and we appreciate the insight. And then not just her, anybody. If you're around somewhere, you know something, or we do something that needs fixing, let us know, because we appreciate the information.
Yeah, we'll give him shout outs because Dale is a fanatic for details.
Yeah.
That's why he does the show with me, because he loves some details on stuff.
Yeah, we could do this a lot faster if I wouldn't keep going, wait a minute. That is not what happened.
He goes down some rabbit holes on some stuff, and I appreciate it a whole lot.
And a lot of times this stuff, it don't really mean a lot, but it does to me.
Yeah.
It's like, wait, we got to get this right.
So how many oil stains were in the driveway? Was it 1 or 2? Yeah. I want to know.
And where were they?
Yeah.
How big was that? Were they aligned?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he loves details, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. All right, enough of that.
I'll send you a card.
Yeah, enough of that sappy stuff. We're gonna get after this short break. We're gonna get going on this episode.
Let's do it, bud.
All right, Dale, we're back.
We are back,
and man, we're back in North Carolina,
and it's still cold.
Yeah, but we're in North Carolina on this episode.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it's still cold here in North Carolina, but our episode this week is from North Carolina.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It's a little ways down the road.
Yeah, but we're going back to the 80s on this one.
Our favorite time.
This is a crazy case, man. I brought this case to you to do, and you got all into it and got to digging and finding the details on it, and, man, it's crazy.
It is.
Yeah. But our story that we got this week starts on May the 7th of 1985.
Yeah, there's a lot of details to go in with that 85, and I'll try to pop them in there as we go.
Yeah, but it starts with a guy by the name of Tim Hennis, and he is a 27-year-old Army sergeant in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Right.
They got some Army bases down there and some military bases down around that area.
That place is huge.
Yeah, but tell us a little bit about the Fort Bragg area.
Well, Fort Bragg, which is now Fort Liberty,
Yeah, they renamed it. Yeah.
Anyway, it's a military installation out there in Fayetteville, but it's one of the largest military installations in the world by population, with over 52,000 military personnel.
Wow.
So there's a ton of people down
There's
here.
a lot of people down there.
Yeah, the total land mass is like 250 square miles.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty place. It's big enough to have 2 zip codes. So, yeah, there's a pretty big military presence in North Carolina down there on Fayetteville.
Yeah, and there's also Air Force Base down there called Pope Air Force Base.
Correct.
Yeah, a lot of military down there.
Yeah.
But this is in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and this is when Tim Hennis, he responded to a classified ad from a local woman who was trying to sell an English setter dog. But the posting appeared in a newspaper, and the newspaper was called the Beeline Grab Bragg. And this newspaper serves the military community surrounding that area. And after Tim talked it over for a while with his wife, her name was Angela, Tim drove across town to go see the dog.
Right.
And according to his later account, it was about a little after 9 p.m. on this May the 7th. He had parked his white Chevette.
Little white Chevette.
Yeah, we know about Chevettes. I used to have a Chevette.
You did. Blue.
I did. Yeah, but I'd tell all the women, say, yeah, I got a vet.
Let's leave off the Chev
The
part.
Chev part. You leave that part off, yeah. But but he had parked his white Chevette in front of 367 Summer Hill Road. That's where the dog was that he was going to go look at.
Right.
And this house is a ranch house. It was a brick house, and it had black shutters.
Yeah.
And
I think he had called actually and to talk to her about the dog and see if it would be all right if he came over that night. And she said, yeah, probably a good idea, because she kind of wanted her kids to be in the bed, and that way when the dog goes, it wouldn't be so upsetting.
Yeah, and I get that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he walked up the driveway, and he was holding a leash.
Yeah.
And he knocked on the door, and a lady who put the ad in, her name's Katie Eastburn, she invited him inside.
Mm-hmm.
And Katie was a small woman with short dark hair and just a pretty young lady. And she was 31 at the time. We'll post pictures of all this and her. But she was a pretty lady. But Tim Hennis, he was a big dude.
He was a big guy.
Yeah, it's been reported he had different height, but what we found out, he was anywhere from 6'4" to 6'6".
Yes.
Probably closer to 6'6".
Yeah, he's a big guy.
Yeah.
My dad was 6'6", so yeah, that's
Big man.
That's a big man.
I remember your dad. He was a big man. But Tim, he towered over, and he was described as having heavy eyelids, and he had a light mustache and thin blonde hair that parted on the right side. But Katie told him that, like we said, she just put her 3 young daughters to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And she also told him that her husband, Gary Eastburn, he was an Air Force captain.
Yeah.
And he was away out of town, and he was at officer school
In Alabama.
Alabama, yeah. And also told him that they were planning to move. This is why they were selling the dog.
Yeah, they were moving to England.
Yeah.
Because, well, Gary had got a job over there, and that's part of the reason he was doing this schooling.
Yeah.
He needed all that to be for this job he was trying to get as a liaison to the Royal Air Force.
Yeah, so he was moving on up.
And they were worried about their dog. I mean, they didn't really want to get rid of the dog, but they were kind of worried about the transition and the toleration of the quarantine process and all this that the dog would have to go through, and they just thought maybe it'd just be a better idea just to rehome Dixie to a good home. And that's why the ad was like $10, so it wasn't like he was trying to jack up. Of course, this is 1985. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just to kind of, as she said, to keep the cranks away. That's just why we put the $10 in there. So I don't even know if they took the $10.
Yeah, keep the weirdos calling.
Yeah, or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that was the reason they got rid of the dog, because when I was doing some research, my daughter's like, wait, why are they getting rid of this dog? They were flipping out about this dog.
Yeah, I don't understand the whole quarantine process of animals. I mean, my dog is better vaccinated than I am.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand all that. But
Well, I don't either, but it's got to be something to do with going to another country or something.
Could be, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. But anyway, Tim Hennis later recalled that Katie told him that they were just trying to get a good home for Dixie and had included, like we said, the $10.
Right.
And Tim, he liked the dog, and he wanted to take it home to make sure it was going to get along with their other dog. They had a Spitz.
Yeah. What was his name? Snowball or something?
I think it was.
Snowflake or Snow something.
Something like that, yeah. But Katie watched from the driveway as he led Dixie to the Chevette, and they drove off together. Now, it was about 4 days later. Gary Eastman, this is Katie's husband.
That's Eastman. Eastburn.
Yeah.
Eastburn, yeah.
Yeah, he had phoned his wife for their regular Saturday morning conversation.
Now, this is a part where you need to jump back to the 80s, because the deal was he was far away, and it was cheaper for her to call him on the little phone that was outside the quarters where he was staying.
Out there in the hallway from his room he was staying in.
Yeah, that was like I'm assuming it's like a pay phone or something, but maybe not, maybe a private phone. But either way, it was better to do that than for him to call her collect. Now, back then there was no cell phones, and anywhere you called that was out of your area cost a lot.
It was a long distance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't know what that is nowadays, because you
Yeah.
can just pick up your cell phone, call anywhere, it don't matter. Used to, like here, you could even just call outside the next county or the next town over, and you're paying extra.
Yeah.
So that was a big deal, and it was such a big deal that they had made it where we called each other once a week.
Yeah.
So there was a Saturday morning thing.
But they were writing letters back and forth and mailing them.
Right.
Yeah.
In
Pretty
between
often.
time. Yeah. I mean, and that goes back to show you this is still in the 80s, right?
This is in the 80s. But Gary had phoned his wife for their regular Saturday morning conversation, and she didn't answer.
Well, he actually went out there to wait for her to call at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And by 8:15, he's getting worried. And a little bit later, he's like, dang, well, one collect call won't hurt. So then he tried to call her.
Yeah.
And he got no answer.
And he tried again.
Later in the day, yeah.
And didn't get no answer.
Right.
And he was going to have to go out with his squad to do some stuff.
He had to go on a run.
Yeah.
What was it called? Some kind of run where you just run till you can't run no more or something like that.
Yeah.
It was some kind of special run or something.
So when he got back, he was going to try to call again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she never answered.
And this was at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No answer. So it was Sunday. And this was Mother's Day.
Yep.
And the Eastburn's neighbor there in Fayetteville, his name was Bob Seafeld.
Correct.
He was military.
He was.
He had noticed that there were 3 uncollected newspapers in the Eastburn's driveway. And he was thinking that maybe Katie and their girls, they had 3 daughters, were gone away somewhere. They had left town.
Well, the night before, Gary had actually called somebody. He called the base, or had the base call somebody up there, because he was worried about it. And somebody had come by Bob Seafeld's house that night, Saturday night, about 11 o'clock, and knocked on the door and asked if he had seen him. And he said, no, he hadn't seen him, but he didn't think nothing was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next morning on Mother's Day, he had to go to work, and then he said he had told his wife that morning that the more he thought about it, the more it bothered him. So then when he got back from home from whatever he had to do that day, that's when he went over there, and he said he picked up those newspapers that he'd seen and carried them, put them up on the back porch, and he had really been worried about it. So then he was going to go over and see what was going on.
Yeah, and he'd also noticed that their Toyota station wagon hadn't been moved in days.
Correct.
Yeah. So Seafeld went next door and rang the doorbell several times.
He did.
And he heard
What he thought was
a baby crying inside.
right.
And this when Bob Seafeld told his wife to call the sheriff's office.
Right. And then by this time his wife had come over, because he had told her that, 'cause I guess I'm assuming when he got home from work, he just got out of the car and went straight over there.
Yeah.
She had come over because he had mentioned it to her that morning, and he's like, listen, this sounds like there's a baby in here or crying. Do you hear it? And so then he rung a doorbell, and then she heard it. So then he's like, what do we do? So we got to call somebody, and that's when he said, call the sheriff's department.
So an officer arrived at the Eastburn's house.
Correct.
And they were walking around the house trying to see if they could see anything inside the house.
Mm-hmm.
And they were on the back side of the house. And this when the officer...
He put his hands up around his eyes and put his face to the window.
Yeah, to be able to see him.
Yeah,
peek in
because
the
when
window.
he first got there, they didn't hear nothing. And he rang a doorbell, and Seafeld said that he kind of looked at him like he thought he was lying to him. And he's like, well, no. So then he finally did hear it, and I think they called another officer, and that's when they come on scene. To see
They got
what's
the
going
okay
on.
to...
Yeah.
They cut the window screen and climbed into a bedroom window.
Yeah, the windows were unlocked.
Yeah. This is when 22-month-old Jana Eastburn, she was standing in her crib just crying her eyes out. And the officer that went into the house, he passed Jana through the window to the Seafelds, the next door neighbors. And Dale, there was a strong odor coming from the house.
Right.
And when the officer stepped into the hallway from the bedroom, this is when he saw dead bodies at the end of the hall.
Yeah, not good.
And he radioed the homicide unit. Now, just a few minutes later, detectives from the Cumberland County Sheriff's Department, their names were Robert Biddle and Jack Watts, they got on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And they entered the house through the carport door. Now, this day, it was a particular warm spring day, and the windows were shut. but they could smell something bad coming from the house, man.
Yeah.
And this is when Biddle had said he'd never forget the smell that was in there.
The smell of death.
Yeah, and the detectives proceeded through the home, and they were looking through each of the rooms along the way. And in the living room, they saw a pair of jeans. 2 buttons had been ripped off a blouse and a pair of torn ladies' underpants.
Right.
And they found 5-year-old Kara. This was the oldest of the girls they had. She was curled up under a Star Wars blanket.
Mm-hmm. She was in her bed, though.
Yeah. And Dale, she had been stabbed repeatedly in her chest.
Yeah. Looked like she just had pulled the blanket up over her head to hide or something.
Yeah. And next they entered the master bedroom. And this is when the 3-year-old daughter, her name was Erin, she lay on one side of the bed.
In the floor.
Yeah, and she had been bludgeoned in the chest and back.
Yeah, beat to death.
And on the other side of the bed lay Katie Eastburn.
Yes.
And Dale, she was naked from the waist down, and she had been stabbed 15 times. She'd been raped, and semen was also found inside her body after some tests had been done. Yeah.
And her shirt had been ripped open and her bra cut in half in the center.
Yep.
And her panties were cut off instead of torn off. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
And all 3 of the Eastburns, their throats had been cut.
Yeah, deeply.
Yeah, very deeply.
Especially the children.
Yeah, it's sad, man. So not long afterwards, at the military base where Gary was in Alabama, the phone rang outside the hallway. This is the phone that he used to call back and forth to his wife there in Fayetteville. And one of the officers picked it up and told Gary that the call was for him.
Man, this would be awful because, he's been waiting for this phone call for, a day at least.
Yeah.
And he's like, finally, there she is. And he starts to go to the phone, and they give it to him, and he goes, it's some detective.
His heart had to drop, man.
Oh, yeah.
I bet his stomach fell out of him and everything.
Yeah, he said he just grabbed the phone and goes, is there anybody alive, or are all of them dead, or something? It was something like that, and I hate to get that
something to that effect.
Yeah, and I hate to get that wrong, and then the detective was kind of weird about it, but Gary's like, listen, detectives just don't call you.
No, but this Detective Watts, he was on the line, and all he told Gary was, there's been a death in the family.
Yeah, and
you need to come home.
They wouldn't tell him nothing else.
No. So it was this point that Gary got on an airplane with another officer, and they flew to Fayetteville.
Yeah.
And they went directly to the police station.
Well, and they took him straight to the police station.
Yeah, the detectives, they were asking Gary a lot of questions, trying to get some leads out of him.
I mean, it was for a couple hours, too.
Yeah, but they
pretty much all he wanted to do was see his daughter.
Yeah.
He did know that Jana had survived.
Yes.
I think a chaplain or someone at where he was actually did call and go, listen, you got to tell me something, because, this is awful. And I think they told him that Jana had survived, so he had went to Gary and said, listen, keep your head up. At least Jana survived. So.
Yeah. But they ruled Gary out pretty quick, because they knew he was in Alabama. So
yeah, he was down there for a 10-week thing. So
10 weeks.
Yeah, so he'd been there for 9 weeks, because he was almost ready to come home.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what's crazy
that's
too.
Awful, man.
But they were pressing Gary for leads on anything, and he had told the detectives that Katie had recently given the dog Dixie away, and that he didn't know anything about the man or the people who took the dog.
Correct.
Yeah, and it was later that night. The detectives, Biddle and Watts, they returned to the house there on Summer Hill Drive, and it'd been cordoned off by the police with tape.
Well, if you see the video, it looks like a string with a sign hanging on it.
Yeah, crime scene.
I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, it is kind of funny, but yeah, they had it cordoned off. And the crime scene technicians had found fingerprints and hair. And they did a luminol test, and it produced a glow when the chemicals react with the iron and the hemoglobins.
Well, they were really,
it works.
they were really shocked when they went in, and there was not a lot of blood for the wounds that had happened.
Very true.
Until they got to looking into it and figured out why. But yeah, definitely once they got in there with the luminol, they could tell that somebody had tried to clean this place up.
Yeah, and it showed faint smears of blood on the walls and in the master bathroom. And it was almost as if somebody had tried to clean up the place.
Correct.
Yeah. And it was just a little after midnight. There was a young African American. His name was Patrick Cone.
C-O-N-E.
Yeah. And he was looking for the investigators there in that neighborhood. And he had told Biddle that on Friday morning, it was about 3:30 a.m.
He was walking back from his girlfriend's house.
Yeah, he had seen a tall white man wearing jeans, a knit cap, and a black members-only jacket leaving the Eastburn's driveway, and he had a garbage bag slung over his shoulder.
Kind of odd.
Yeah, very odd. Very odd.
Members only. Did you have one?
No, I did not.
Me neither.
No.
Mine, I had one similar, but it was a Pierre Cardin.
Oh, you was more high tech.
It was knockoff city is what it was.
I didn't even have a knockoff of a members only jacket.
Yeah, and then that's another 80s thing. I don't know. Members only jacket was basically a damn jacket that had a pocket on the front and two little snap things
On the collar.
on the top.
And this tiny little logo on the pocket that had members only.
And it was so popular. You had to go to Belks or somewhere to buy them.
You had to go to a fancy store
I
to get
think
them.
we got the Sky City knockoff, but and Pierre Cardin's
Yeah, but I never had a members only.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right, back to the program.
But this Patrick Cohn, he said he saw the man wearing a black members only jacket. The guy told him that leaving a little early this morning.
Yeah. But he said he was starting. I think he said he was starting a little early.
Getting an early start or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Because this was, in the early morning hours.
Oh, yeah, 3 o'clock. Come on.
Yeah. So when Cohn stopped and turned around, he saw the taillights of a white Chevette that were glowing before the car pulled away.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And that Tuesday, Cohn had worked with an agent from the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation to create a composite sketch of the man. And across town, Gary had went to the home. He had went with the detectives to his house, where his wife and 2 daughters had been slain.
They took him over there, and that was the last place in the world he wanted to go.
Oh, of course.
But they needed him to go and look and see if there were anything missing out of the house.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what the hell was going on here and why this would happen.
Yep. And Gary knew that there was an envelope of cash there at the house.
Yeah, there was like $300 in her panty drawer is what I found.
Yep.
Yeah.
And Katie's ATM card was missing, and the piece of paper with the ATM pin or password that was written on was gone.
Right. From what I found, there was like one of those metal like fire boxes or whatever have all your documents in.
Yeah.
And that was gone. So I'm assuming that that's where her password and all was in that box.
Yeah.
Because insurance and all that kind of stuff.
But I can't imagine Gary going there and seeing all this stuff. And they tried to hide the blood or cover it up, but he could still see.
You could still see it.
What had happened.
Yeah. God, that would be so bad.
I know. So on Wednesday, the Wednesday after the murders, Tim Hennis, the guy that got the dog, he was at home having lunch with his wife, Angela.
Yeah, they said he had like an hour and a half lunch from the base, so he only had lived like 20 minutes, so he'd always go home. And he had time to go home, have lunch, and spend a little time with his wife before he went back to work.
Yeah, and they had a small daughter, too.
Yes.
And this is when they had the TV on, and they saw a special news broadcast come across the TV.
Yeah, and Angela had been watching this stuff.
Yeah, and it was announced that investigators were interested in a man who drove a white Chevette and had picked up an English setter from 367 Summer Hill Road the previous week.
Right.
That's all they were looking for.
Yeah. Because they knew that this is possibly the last person to see him alive, so he was trying to, get the timeline down.
Very true. And this is when Tim said his wife and I were shocked. It was the first time we realized that the lady who had been murdered was the one I'd picked the dog up from. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. So Hennis and his wife Angela and their newborn daughter Christina drove to the law enforcement center in downtown Fayetteville.
Yeah, he called his boss, said, I'm going to be a little bit late coming back, because his wife said, look, they're looking for you. We got to go down there.
Yeah. So the officers, they led Tim Hennis into a room for questioning.
Mm-hmm.
And when Watts saw Hennis, he paused.
Yeah, he about dropped everything, didn't he?
Because Tim Hennis's face was just like the composite sketch, nearly identical. And that's when he knew he needed to talk to this man.
Yes.
Yeah. And the authorities had determined that the murders most likely took place on that Thursday night, as Katie had been seen by the neighbors earlier that evening, and the newspapers were beginning to pile up on Friday morning.
Right. Yeah, she had been over to the next door neighbors that Thursday. I think he said that she had come by to borrow some milk, and then he had made some popcorn and hang out with the kids for a little bit, and then she'd taken them back home.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Watts, the detective, he asked Tim Hennis to recount his activities that night. And he said he had driven his wife and daughter to his in-laws and then returned home after stopping for gas.
First when they brought him in, I think when they they brought him in and then told me he'd ask some questions, and then asked him to waive his rights. And he's like, wait a minute, why do you want me to do that? Am I a suspect? Like, no, you're not a suspect. I just want to ask you some questions. He says, why do you want me to waive my rights? He said, "Well, I want you to ask some questions, and then we want to see if we can get some blood and stuff out like that from you. But you're definitely not a suspect. We're just trying to find out some stuff." So he's like, "Okay."
Yeah. But they found Tim to be a little arrogant.
Yes.
Yep. But Tim Hennis stayed for almost 7 hours for this interrogation.
Mm-hmm.
And he did provide blood, saliva, and hair samples, as well as fingerprints and palm prints.
Well, the thing was, they took him in there and asked him these questions, and then when they saw him, they were like, "This has got to be our guy."
He looked just like the composite.
And he's trying to keep his excitement down, the detective, but meanwhile also trying to stall Tim because they had a fingerprint expert coming that was like an hour away. So that's why it took an extra long time, because they're trying to get all this done before he leaves.
Yeah. And when they asked Tim about Katie Eastburn, he acknowledged picking up the dog on Tuesday, but said that he never saw the woman again, and he never even got her name.
Right.
That's what he was saying. And he also claimed that Katie had called she actually called him on Thursday night to see how the dog Dixie was getting along with their Spitz.
Correct.
Yeah.
And he said it was getting along, everything was great, and that was it.
That's what he was saying. And the detectives also were saying that Tim Hennis was a challenge to interrogate.
Mm-hmm.
That he wasn't a dumb guy. And they also said that Tim had scored 128 on the Army General Aptitude Test. And Dale, this was placing him in the 97th percentile.
That's up there, ain't it?
So if he was hiding something, he wasn't likely to slip up, is what they were saying.
Very smart guy.
Yeah. But the detectives wanted this Patrick Cohn. This was the janitor that had spotted Tim,
They gave him the composite.
Yeah, he wanted him to review a photo lineup.
Yeah, while they still had him in custody. So they're doing all this behind the scenes while they're asking him questions for 7 hours.
That's right. So a photo of Tim was taken, and the image was pasted on to a manila folder along 5 other photos right there with them.
Yeah, 5 other white guys, blonde, mustache, look similar.
Yes, that's right. And they was able to track down Patrick Cohn, and they showed him this folder and asked him if he recognized any of the men.
Mm-hmm.
And he said number 5 has his nose.
But
it's definitely number 2, which was Tim.
Yes.
Yeah. And he was talking about the nose. He said Tim had the nose too, because he had a black man's nose.
That was his words.
His words, yeah.
Because he just had a wider nose than.
Yeah. This is what Patrick was saying.
Yeah.
So the detectives,
they were really impressed with the details that this guy remembered.
This Patrick guy.
Talking to him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially at 3 o'clock in the morning. Even when they were doing a composite, he was like, "No, that ain't right." No, I mean, the chin, this, the nose, the eyes, everything. He kept going and going, and they weren't getting irritated with him at all, but they were really impressed that he had that much detail to remember.
Yeah.
So he wanted to get it right.
And we'll post pictures of this composite and,
yes,
and Tim Hennis and all this stuff so everybody can see. I mean, he does look a lot like the composite sketch. Yeah. Yep. But they didn't have anything else on Tim, so they let him go home.
Right.
Yeah. And late that evening, there was a warrant that was obtained, and law enforcement officials, they descended upon the Hennis house.
Yeah, they thought they had enough on him to bring him in.
Yep. And when Tim Hennis came to the door, detectives and agents from the State Bureau of Investigation, they streamed past him. They were looking for clues in this house.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he told him, said, "I hope you guys know what you're looking for, or what you're doing."
Yeah, that's when they brought him in. He just looked at the cops and said, "I hope you guys knew what you're doing."
Yeah.
Because they come at like 1 o'clock in the morning and grabbed him and took him down there.
Can you imagine somebody coming to your house at 1 o'clock in the morning with a search warrant?
Right, that's what he said. That his wife spoke up and said, "Somebody's beating on our door." And he went to the door and they said, "This is the cops. We have a warrant for your arrest and you need to open the door." So he went and grabbed some clothes and took him, told his wife to call his dad.
Yeah. And Tim was handcuffed and charged with 3 counts of murder and 1 count of rape.
Mm-hmm. He said something smart like, "Looks like I get to wear one of them little orange jumpsuits."
Yeah. He kind of sneered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I don't know how tall these police officers was, but man, he looks like he just towers over them, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's a big guy. He's a tall guy.
Yeah.
But now, remember, Tim was in the Army.
Correct.
And they had jurisdiction over Tim.
Mm-hmm.
And they could have court-martialed him on these murder charges, but the crimes were committed off base. And they were generally prosecuted by the Cumberland County.
Correct.
And his father was a retired IBM executive So he had money, and he hired two prominent Fayetteville lawyers. Their name was Gerald Beaver and Billy Richardson to defend him.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a pretty tough task on this. There were several eyewitnesses recalled seeing a white Chevette on Summer Hill Road the evening of the murders.
That's something you wouldn't forget either. I mean, this man getting out of a Chevette would be something to see.
Yeah.
Like he's keep on coming out.
Yeah, we talked about this earlier. Yeah, he would keep on coming out of that car for a while. When they were asking and questioning Tim Hennis, he had an alibi, or he said he had an alibi. That he returned home immediately after dropping his wife and daughters off at his in-laws.
Yeah, he had, I think that weekend coming up or whatever, he had some 24-hour shifts he had to work.
Yeah.
And it was going to be on Mother's Day, and he wasn't going to be home anyway, so he took his wife and daughter to her mother's.
But there was a lady that come forward.
Yeah, it was.
This lady, her name is Nancy Maser.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's how you pronounce her name. Her last name is spelled Maeser.
Pretty close, yeah.
And she was a former girlfriend of Tim Hennis.
Correct.
And she was telling the police and authorities a different story, Dale.
Just a little different.
Just a little different. Tim Hennis and Nancy Maser, they had met years earlier at a club near Fort Bragg.
Correct.
It was a honky-tonk bar kind of thing.
It's kind of weird that the honky-tonk would be called a Dragon Club.
Yeah, that was the name of it.
What the heck?
But they had dated for a while, but they eventually broke up.
Mm-hmm.
But Tim, he still occasionally stopped by her house.
Right.
And on May the 9th, Tim Hennis, knowing that Nancy's husband was deployed in Germany, he made an unannounced visit.
Yeah.
Yeah, she let him in, and they talked for a while, and this is when she tapped Tim's wedding band and asked him how his marriage was going.
Right.
And he said that she left me. That's what he told his former girlfriend.
Right.
It's sort of a misleading reference to his wife. She'd visited her parents.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to stop by and see what he could get going on, and then lied to the woman.
He was looking for a hookup. That's what it was.
He was.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like to me.
But Nancy wasn't having none of this.
No.
So he got just a little bit discouraged, and he left.
He left.
This is what she was telling the police. But they're thinking that maybe Tim was looking for a little bit of love that night. He remembered that maybe Katie Eastburn was an attractive woman and home alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then maybe he stopped by her house. And
knowing that her husband was out of town.
Yeah.
Very possible.
That's what they're putting together.
Yeah.
And also them linking Tim to this violent murders. They had also recovered that Tim had a second job to support his income. He had worked at a local kitchen, and he had got in a scuffle with a fellow employee.
Mm-hmm.
So they had also found that out on him too.
So a slight violent streak.
Yeah, that's what
they're saying.
That's what they're claiming. Yeah. So there's one more thing too. The Friday morning after the murders, Tim Hennis had taken a single item of clothing to the dry cleaners to be cleaned.
What was that?
This was this black members only jacket.
You think?
Yeah.
See, if he'd had a Pierre Cardin, he wouldn't have to worry about it.
That's right, yeah. And also the Saturday, Tim Hennis's neighbors recalled that Tim had poured lighter fluid into a 55-gallon drum or barrel.
Yeah, big burn barrel.
Yeah, that's what we call them, yeah. And he had burned a fire, and he had stoked that fire for at least 5 hours.
Yeah. And the neighbors, they said he had the thing flaming up big. And they didn't know what he was burning, but it didn't like he was burning old mail or nothing.
They said the flames was as high as the house coming out of that barrel. So he had a pretty intense fire burning something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was getting rid of something.
Yeah. And they were wondering if maybe he'd burned some evidence.
Probably.
Yeah, especially Patrick Cohn see him coming out of the house with a garbage bag over his shoulder.
Right.
Yeah.
Carrying some stuff.
So just keep in mind, this is 1985, Dale.
Right, yes.
And forensic science in the United States wasn't exact science.
No, this is way before DNA technology had come out, so we're basically looking at blood typing and fingerprints and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, maybe hair sampling.
Hair
things.
sample.
Yeah. But this Detective Biddle knew that Scotland Yard had begun experimenting with DNA testing. And an office mate wrote a letter to London requesting assistance on the Hennis case. But Scotland Yard, they declined to intercede.
Like, nah, y'all good, go ahead.
Yeah.
Gee, thanks.
But nevertheless, Detective Biddle was confident that he and Watts had the right guy.
Mm-hmm.
So they were staying focused on Tim Hennis.
Yeah, basically they said, every turn we did, every corner we turned, and he just kept popping up every time.
Yeah, that's right.
Couldn't have a more perfect person here.
So they're building a case on Tim Hennis.
They are.
And they're going to take him to trial. So about a month before the trial, there was another eyewitness that come forward. The investigators had discovered, this ATM card had been stolen from Katie Eastburn, and it had been used on May the 10th at 10:54 p.m. and again on May the 11th at 8:56 a.m. And get this, Dale, at both times, the maximum amount allowed for withdrawal,
which was just $150 at the time.
Yeah, that's what was taken out, the $150 each time.
Well, I guess if you're going to use somebody's card, you might as well get all you can get.
Yeah, get the maximum amount
right.
each time. And they also noticed that Tim Hennis had paid a monthly rent of $300.
Yeah, I think it was $310, but
yeah, rounded. It was $310, but $300 total had been taken out of the account.
Correct.
And that amount had been late for his rental payment.
He had wrote the landlord a check and said, "Don't cash it yet. Just give me a couple of days," or whatever he said.
Yeah. And they also dug a little deeper, and they found out that Tim had a history of some financial problems, including 3 prior convictions for writing bad checks.
Yeah, he was not very good with money.
No. And in 1984, just a year prior, he was kicked out of flight school for bouncing checks and lying to an officer about it. So this ain't looking too good for him.
No.
And after the murder, the investigators, they tracked down a woman who had visited this ATM 3 minutes after Eastburn's stolen credit card had been used on this Saturday morning.
Yeah, they went through the logs and found out, I guess, the card number of whoever was next.
Yeah, but keep in mind, this is 1985, and there were no cameras at the ATMs.
Correct.
Yeah. And when the woman was asked about this, she recalled seeing a tall man with blonde hair wearing camouflage trousers and getting into a small light-colored car. And this case seemed to be pretty airtight.
There it is again, every time.
Yeah. And before the trial, they presented all this to Tim Hennis, and he was offered a plea deal of 2 counts of second-degree murder with the likely penalty of 2 consecutive life sentences. So, but they
said, nah.
Yeah, but they were going to seek the death penalty on this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And he told his lawyer, he didn't do it.
I'm not pleading guilty to something I didn't do.
That's what he was saying. And going to trial, this was in the summer of 1986. The lead prosecutor, his name was William Van Story. He told the jurors what happened in that house was utter madness.
Yeah.
It's one of the most tragic things that has ever happened in this country. And Dale, they were showing dozens of gruesome photographs from the crime scene.
This is awful, man. And I think they tried to get even more into the, to put in, but the judge only allowed them so many. But
I think they showed 99 photographs.
They wanted 99. I think you give them about a third of them.
Okay.
And it was photos of the crime scene of the kids and her, and also autopsy photos.
Yes.
Now, when we say they showed them to the courtroom, we're not just saying just showing them. They would put them up and leave them up on this screen. They had just had a brand new screen built into this courtroom, and it was 7.5 feet by 11 feet.
This is a movie theater screen.
So, yeah, basically.
Yeah, small movie theater screen, yeah.
And they just kept, and then basically you seeing while they're talking about this guy, you're looking at him and looking at these pictures constantly, and that's, you're going to put them together every time.
And they were keeping them up the whole time during this trial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, it'd be awful, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And even the prosecutor said, "Is there any doubt in your mind?" "No, sir." And the prosecutor saved his emotional language for the closing argument. In the closing argument, he said, "This is your baby killer," he told the jury. "He's the one responsible for the death of these kids and their mother. The man responsible for taking their lives is sitting in this courtroom, breathing the same air as you are, and hopefully it won't be for much longer."
Oh, man.
Man, that's pretty tough.
All that while looking at this giant screen of death.
Yeah.
Babies.
I can't imagine seeing this, man.
I mean, these kids, there were 3 and 5.
Yeah.
3 years old and 5 years old, and one of them almost the head was almost cut completely off.
And they tried to pick her up.
Yeah, it said that it did not really just slash her throat. It went all the way around.
Yeah. But Dale, the jury deliberated for 10 hours,
Yes.
And they came back with guilty verdicts on all counts.
Guilty.
3 of first-degree murders and 1 of rape.
Correct.
And Tim Hennis pulled off his wedding band and said, give it to Richardson.
Now, he gave it to Richardson and said, give this to Angela.
Yes, give it to my wife and tell her I love her.
Yeah.
And Tim Hennis was led from the courtroom to a suicide prevention cell.
Correct.
And just 3 days later at his sentencing, he was sentenced to death.
To death.
Yeah. And Tim Hennis goes on death row in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yep.
Yeah. He's sent to a prison in Raleigh.
He was one of 17 convicts on death row.
Yeah. And 9 weeks after he arrived, an inmate was executed by lethal injection at the facility.
Right.
Yeah. And during this time, Tim Hennis received a letter that was postmarked on July the 8th. And,
which is the day he got sentenced.
Yeah. And this letter read, it said, Dear Mr. Hennis, I did the crime. I murdered the Eastburns. Sorry you're doing the time. I'll be safely out of North Carolina when you read this. Thanks, Mr. X.
Mr. X.
Yep. But they never determined who Mr. X's identity was.
No, and the sheriff's department also received a similar letter from this Mr. X.
They did.
And we'll try to find a picture of this letter and post it because it's just pretty creepy, the handwriting and all. It's just weird looking.
Yeah, that's kind of weird. And it looked like the letter had been written with by a person with their non-dominant hand. It's kind of it's scratchy.
Scratchy and scrawly, yeah. And not straight. I don't know.
Yeah. But Tim Hennis was on death row in Raleigh, North Carolina.
That's right.
And in the meantime, Gary Eastburn, the
father,
the husband, he lost his wife, he had lost his 2 daughters, and he just had his small daughter, Jana.
And she had been in the hospital. When they found her in that bed, her teeth were like already blackening a little bit from malnutrition, and she was such bad shape, but she did survive.
Suffering from dehydration. And when they got her out of the window, it's going back to her just a little bit, the neighbor, Miss Seafelt, that lived next door, she took her in and was trying to
clean her up.
Yeah, cleaned her up. And
she'd been in that same diaper and clothes for
3 days, yeah. Trying to give her something to eat, and she'd throw it up.
Yeah, because her stomach wasn't ready to take food.
No.
Apparently, so they had to work that in slow, probably had to IV her.
Yeah, but Gary was trying to move on, but he had met Katie 12 years earlier at a softball game for singles.
Yeah.
And he recalls that it was like somebody hit me between the eyes with a ball-peen hammer.
Yeah, he was in love at first sight.
Oh, yeah. And they were married in 1975, and Katie got pregnant 3 years later.
It's kind of funny. They said they got together. It was a few weird circumstances because she was kind of engaged to somebody and just went to this thing because she went with one of her friends. And he didn't really want to go to this softball thing, but he's like, well, it's going to be softball. It can't be too bad because it was a singles thing. He didn't really, whatever. But then he saw her and fell in love with her. And then, they got together and they were together for a while and said things were going okay, but never great. But as soon as she got pregnant, it was over. It was like he was Mr. Super Dad, and Super Guy, because that was the only thing I think he needed to keep him, because he was still go out and hang out with the guys, do this kind of stuff. But as soon as that happened, whole different story.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's what he had always wanted to be, a father and a husband, and now it's true.
But with military families, they're constantly moving.
Correct.
Yeah, constantly being relocated and everything, but Katie was all on board. She was doing the thing and being the mom and running the house, getting ready for the move to England. Gary's getting ready to be transferred to England. She was doing the thing.
Right.
Yeah. When Katie was murdered and those 2 daughters were murdered, Gary canceled his plans to go to England.
He just didn't know what to do.
Yeah. He did finally accept this liaison job in 1988.
Yeah, he probably just ready to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, and he took his baby.
It'd be hard to live in, especially if he tried to be in that same house.
But he took his baby Jana with him, and they went to England.
Yes.
But Hennis's lawyers, during this time, they were filing appeals, trying to do anything to get him off death row, saying the photographs shown at the trial were too gruesome to be shown, and they showed too many, and, just trying to do anything to get him.
They were basically saying the prosecution was cheating.
Yeah.
I mean,
and trying to get him a retrial.
Yes.
Anything they could do.
Right.
But get this, Dale. There was an appeal.
Yes, there was.
And judges, they ruled 5-2 in order of Tim Hennis to get a new trial.
And he gets a brand new trial.
He was awarded a new trial.
Mm-hmm.
And the ruling is still invoked by defense attorneys seeking to limit the presentation of photographs, and that were redundant and like we talked about, unfairly prejudiced to jurors.
It was just overdone.
Yeah, it was overdone. But for almost 3 years, Tim's lawyers, they've been preparing ways to undermine the government's case.
Yeah, they was working, and meanwhile, the other side's like, this is a slam dunk. What are we going to have to do? I mean, it was so easy the first time.
Yeah. So they go back to court to retry Tim Hennis on these murders.
Yes.
Yeah. And the retrial is taking place in Wilmington, North Carolina, and they pretty much focused on discrediting everybody, all the witnesses, including this Patrick Cohn.
Right.
The one that saw Tim Hennis, coming out of the driveway that night.
Yeah.
But they referred to Patrick Cohn as a thief and a liar.
Yeah, they're trying to discredit him hard.
Yeah. Because he had several offenses against him, Yeah,
between these two trials, he just kind of got a little wild.
Yeah, they said that Patrick Cohn had stolen an ATM card and been drunk in public and obstructing an officer and driving a car with an expired registration and different things, just discredited him totally.
Right. And in one of these drunken episodes, he even told a cop, "You can't arrest me. I've been helping you guys out.
Yeah.
You need to check with your district attorney, man."
Yeah, he was almost like a celebrity.
Yeah,
in a way.
I thought he was. Yeah.
Yeah.
He said, "I'm your main witness in this Hennessy trial. You can't do nothing to me."
Yeah. That's what he was saying.
Then later, it kind of pissed the cop off. He just I don't care who you are, and done what he had to do. And then later, he went back, and sure enough, all the charges were dismissed.
Yeah, ain't that crazy?
Mm-hmm. That don't look good either.
No, it don't. And Hennis's lawyers also suggested that Cohn's testimony at the first trial was inaccurate. Cohn had said that the weather on that night was, clear, and he could see everything. The stars were out, and he could see everything.
Correct.
But they called a meteorologist in, and they said that the night was cloudy.
Yes.
Yeah, and there was a helicopter pilot who had to abort a medevac mission because the weather was so, dark and overcast.
Right.
So it was totally discrediting Patrick Cohn.
Trying to, anyway.
Yeah. But before the retrial, the original prosecutor, the William Van Story, he had left the district attorney's office for private practice.
Mm-hmm.
And the prosecutors reassigned to the trial was Calvin Collier and John Dixon. And they seemed...
They just kind of melded in.
Yeah, they were focused on this totally.
Yeah, like I said, they thought this was going to be a breeze.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, we already done this, so we don't even have to do the work.
We've done it one time, we've done it again.
Meanwhile, the other side's been working for 3 years to discredit everything they've done.
That's what they were doing, the
It's
defense,
kinda
yeah.
they knew what they were going. They had they already had the exam before the test, basically.
And they also presented the letters from this so-called Mr. X.
Yeah.
And they were read aloud in the courtroom.
Ooh.
And the defense also emphasized that just weeks after the murders, the woman who testified to seeing the man resembling Hennis at the ATM, the one that said the 3 minutes.
Yes.
It was,
It's all the tall white guy.
Yeah.
Using. You're right.
They actually silenced the courtroom and ran a clock for 3 minutes.
Yeah, just to show you how long that is.
Yeah, and 3 minutes is a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, just because her card was swiped 3 minutes later don't mean she was, pulled up 3 minutes later. She could have been sitting in her car doing something, and watched him get up and go on and then sit there for a minute, because a lot of people kind of leery of ATMs, especially 1985. That was new stuff.
It was, yeah. And there was a pair of new witnesses testified on Tim Hennis's behalf. There was a woman who delivered the Raleigh News and Observer newspaper each morning, revealed that at 1:45 a.m. she had seen in front of the Eastburn home a long-haired man driving a light-colored van. And the defense then called to the stand a tall, blonde teenage boy from the Eastburn's neighborhood. And he was in a habit of walking the road late at night. And he admitted doing so that night at around 3 a.m. This is on May the 10th, 1985.
Right.
And maybe this could be the person that Patrick Cohn had saw.
Right. So they're starting to go, hey, look over here. It could be this. They're trying to discredit everything.
So when they brought this boy in, they brought him into the courtroom. This was like a Perry Mason moment.
Right.
Yeah. The courtroom just fell silent.
Yes.
This guy was a spitting image of Tim Hennis.
Yeah. So they could almost been brothers.
Yeah.
It was like, holy moly.
Yeah. I'd like to see this guy.
Yeah, I've kind of tried to find photos, but I can't.
You can't find them. And the defense still had a little bit more.
Oh, yeah.
There were footprints outside the house of the Eastburn's home, and they were 3 sizes smaller than Tim Hennis's shoes.
Correct.
And there was a blood spot discovered on the bathroom towel that didn't match Tim Hennis's blood. And investigators had found in the Eastburn's home several hairs, including pubic hair, that belonged to neither Hennis nor the victims. Yeah. And the house was a rental home, so they, the pubic hair had been found near a couch in the living room and not on Katie's body. But the prosecution did little to contest the defense's presentation.
Yeah, they're just sitting there like they already got this warrant.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, these people are like, no, and they're showing all this stuff to going to discredit anything they've said.
And also they talked about this fire and this burn barrel that had been set in Tim Hennis's backyard. And the defense asserted that nothing in that charred remains in that barrel had been traced back to the Eastburn home. And not only did Tim Hennis's members-only jacket lack blood stains, an analysis from the International Fabric Care Institute testified. They bringing in the big guns.
Yes.
Yeah, they also testified that the chemical used in dry cleaning could not remove all blood traces.
Right.
This chemical called Varsol.
Mm-hmm. So they had actually, checked it and seen what was going on with this, and they actually had brought in another members only jacket, same way, with blood on it, took it to the dry cleaners, got it done, and brought it back, and then sprayed it with luminol, and it showed up like a darn Christmas tree.
It lit up.
And they had done it on this jacket, the actual jacket, and nothing showed up.
Yep. And during this trial on April the 10th, 1989, Tim Hennis took the stand in his behalf.
Yeah. Well, he'd already been on death row, and he was already, he was feeling that he didn't do it the first time around, and he felt that he didn't do himself any favors just sitting there. I mean, he already been to death row. What's he got to lose?
Yeah. Worst thing happened to me, I can go back to death row.
Right. Go back where I was. So I'm talking. I'm getting my side told.
Yeah. So Tim Hennis, he was appearing in court in a dark suit, and he took the stand.
Yes.
And he responded to questioning. And there was at one point, prosecutor asked him, he said, Katie Eastburn was an attractive woman, wasn't she? And he responded back, it depends on what you find attractive.
Right. Smart dude, man.
Yeah, very smart. And they asked him, did you find that she was an attractive woman? And Tim admitted that he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he not lie about it. And when Tim was asked about his initial undisclosed visit with this Nancy Macer, the
ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, he said, I forgot about it, sir. I just didn't place that much emphasis on it. It's something that slipped my mind. What one of the jurors said, Tim looked like the kind of asshole that could have done it.
Right.
Yeah, and there was another juror added that he looked like he could be misleading.
Well, he also added, that looks can be very misleading. I mean, you might see a black guy who wears a bunch of gold chains and a do-rag, and you might think he's a thug, but that don't necessarily mean he is.
Don't mean he's a thug.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't, just judge book and cover,
Yeah, and both sides, the defense and the prosecution, they rested their case.
Mm-hmm.
And Richardson, one of the defense lawyers, told the jury, you have physical evidence crying to you, just absolutely crying to you that he's not the man. You've got a pubic hair.
And it ain't his.
It ain't his, and they're putting a doggone square peg in a round hole, and it doesn't fit, and it stinks.
Right.
So 2 days later, the jury reached a verdict, and they came back with not guilty on all counts.
All counts.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine what Gary Eastburn is thinking about all this, man.
Yeah, they had called him, told him to come back from England for this.
So after more than 800 days on death row, Tim Hennis left the courtroom a free man.
Sure did.
Yeah, walked out of the courtroom carrying his daughter, who was now 4 years old, and walked out with his wife.
Yep.
And there were several jurors out in the hallway with Tim shaking his hand.
Yeah, patting him on the back and all kind of stuff.
So leaving the courthouse and the proceedings, Gary Eastburn told a juror that he still believed Hennis was guilty.
Yes.
And he got into the passenger seat of a car and headed back to Fayetteville.
Yeah, said it was the longest drive I've ever been on in my life.
Yeah.
Felt sick, like someone had sucked all the air out of me. Wow.
And kind of like he had let his younger daughter, Jana, down.
Yeah.
All right, Tim Hennis has been acquitted. He's a free man.
Free man.
So after this acquittal, he decided whether or not to re-enlist.
Yes.
Yeah. And a 1987 Supreme Court decision had granted the military greater jurisdiction over civilian crimes, making it possible that he could be court-martialed.
Right.
But Hennis re-enlisted anyway.
Right.
And his lawyers even told him not to re-enlist.
Yeah.
Just give it up, go back into the private sector, and just
Be done.
be done with the Army.
But he didn't want to do that. He's an Army guy.
Yeah. So he re-enlisted.
Yep. And he got all his time, added back that he was in prison. They gave him all that credit for all that time and also back pay for all that time.
3 years of back pay.
Yep.
He got a good conduct medal and a promotion to staff sergeant.
Man.
Yeah, so he's moving on up.
Yeah.
So you'd think this is where the story ends, Dale.
But you would be wrong.
No, in September of 1990, Tim was shipped off to Saudi Arabia for Operation Desert Shield.
Wow.
This is before the Iraq invasion of Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
And according to some reports, he was doing good time over there. I mean, he was a good military man, receiving awards.
He even referred to his deployment as a camping trip in Iraq.
Yeah.
So, he's all down for this.
And he returned to the U.S. the following spring, and then a year later went to Somalia.
Mm-hmm.
And he flew home after the Black Hawk Down incident that happened.
Yeah, that was wild.
Yeah, it was. And Tim Hennis was receiving awards and accolades for his service. And one superior described him as a sterling example for all.
Yeah.
A colleague called him an outstanding officer. And there was another who served with Tim Hennis at Fort Drum in New York, said that Tim was a gentle giant. I would trust him with my family and my friends and everything.
Yep.
He would just trust him completely.
I'm a trusting guy.
Yeah. So in 1998, Tim Hennis, along with his wife Angela and his daughter Christina, and by this time they had a 6-year-old son. His name was Andrew.
Right.
They had moved to Fort Lewis, Washington,
Right.
Washington State. And that year, Gary Eastburn had moved to a city 15 miles away from Fort Lewis.
They had
Fort
no
Lewis.
idea.
No.
So they both, wasn't both. While all this happened was on North Carolina, and of course they went their separate ways, and he
For
went
a
to
while,
England,
yeah.
and he went to here, and then they end up on just a few miles away from each other in Washington State.
All the way across the country.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't know it.
And had no idea.
No. Can you even imagine, dude?
No.
But getting back to Gary Eastburn just a little bit, he took that job, that liaison job in England.
Correct.
Took his daughter Jana over there. And while he was over there during that time, he had met and married a British nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And left the Air Force and remained abroad another few years before moving back to the U.S.
Correct.
Yeah.
It is wild that they live as close but never ran into each other.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And, during this time, Tim Hennis, living in Washington, he had become a scoutmaster with his son's troop, leading the boys on a lot of hiking trips, snow caving expeditions to Mount Rainier, and just doing a lot of things, man. And they even said that Tim was a good influence to these boys.
So basically what you're saying is after this, he's just straight air fella.
Yeah, that's what they're saying, yeah.
Nothing ever happened, nothing bad. He's just regular guy.
A man who has served on death row.
Yeah.
So Tim Hennis, he retired from the U.S. Army in July of 2004 after 23 years of service.
Right.
With the rank of Master Sergeant. He then took a job at a waste treatment facility. All right, Dale, so we're moving up to May the 12th, 2005.
Okay.
And this is 20 years after the Eastburn family murders. And there was a crime analyst who had worked with the Fayetteville Police Department. His name was Billy Crawford. And he was teaching a seminar for homicide detectives on advanced criminal intelligence techniques. And he was presenting the unsolved Eastburn murders to a case study.
Mm-hmm.
But this analyst, they were going through all the Eastburn files and all the stuff that was taken from the home and the evidence at that time of the murders.
Yeah.
And they'd found 2 sperm samples that were taken from Katie's body with a vaginal swab.
Yeah, I think this guy had taken over cold case stuff, and he was just in there looking through evidence boxes, and he seen this one, and he pulled it down and looked through, and he was going through it, and that's when he found that box, and it contained a vaginal swab.
Yeah, and the DNA testing at the time, it was unsophisticated.
There wasn't nothing in the 80s, but by now, that's a whole different story.
Oh, yeah.
By, 2005.
Yeah, so they decided upon themselves to send these vaginal swabs off for testing.
Correct.
They do. And they are gone for a while. They're gone for almost a year. And there was a year later, they received the results on these DNA tests.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, and they got the test back. And guess what, Dale?
What?
the DNA profile from these vaginal swabs and this sperm sample belonged to Tim Hennis.
So the guy that had the whole damn time.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
guy.
and it was like a 1.2 quadrillion times, I mean,
Likely to be Tim Hennis, yeah.
than any other white person in North Carolina. So,
Yeah.
It's a pretty damn certain.
Yeah. So the guy that had been found guilty was put on death row and retried and let go.
Is now free, but now they found evidence that the swab from the rape kit, from the sperm samples, the DNA matched Tim Hennis.
Yeah.
So you can keep your blood samples in your pubic hair you found and all this. This sample came from inside this lady.
Yeah.
So you ain't faking that one, sorry.
No, they ain't nothing getting out of. They ain't getting out of this one at all.
Right. But, double jeopardy, so what do you do?
So this is when the detectives with the lab results, they call up Gary Eastburn.
Yes.
They call him up. And they hadn't spoken in years. And he asked Gary, "Are you sitting down?" And they tell him that we got a DNA hit.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Who?" And he says, "Hennis." And Gary fell silent, man.
Wow.
And just when you think, you're over it and your life's moved on, there's more.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just another turn in the road, man. It's just crazy.
Yeah, so at this point, you got double jeopardy involved. He's been convicted of a crime and then retried and
acquitted.
Yeah.
You can't do it twice.
No, you can't be convicted of the same or be tried for the same crime.
Correct.
Yeah. But there's a little unknown thing called dual sovereignty, Dale.
There he is.
Yeah, you got state courts and then you got federal courts.
Mm-hmm.
So double jeopardy doesn't apply to this. They actually reinstate Tim Hennis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something I didn't know. Once I know when you're in the military and you sign up, they basically, for lack of a better word, they own you, right?
Yeah,
as long as they're paying you, you're theirs.
Tim is receiving a retirement check from the military.
Right. So when you retire from the military, it's not like retire from the furniture factory or whatever, and you getting whatever, Social Security or whatever. Well, you're still getting your pension check. You're basically getting paid from the military still. And so you don't actually ever get out. You're just getting paid a less of a check for less services, I think is how they put it. So you're still basically in the military even though you're retired.
Yes.
So they just called him and told him he'd been reinstated and he'd be in North Carolina by whatever amount of time they gave him, and he was pissed off about it. But what are you going to do? You can't not go.
They reinstated him. He had to go back to Fort Bragg.
Yes.
Yeah, so they get him back in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's back in the military, so the military court is taking over this case, man.
Military court.
Yeah, this is a whole different than state court.
Yeah, come on back. We need to talk to you.
Yeah. So Tim Hennis goes back to trial for these murders.
Yeah, you want kind of come on back. You're back in, and once you get there, like, oh, by the way, you're being charged.
Yeah, for the murder of Katie Eastburn and her two daughters.
Right.
Yeah. Can you even imagine all this time, 20 plus years, living your life,
straight and narrow, free man? They ain't gonna get me.
Serving your country.
I've beat it.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm good. Yeah, they ain't nothing gonna happen to this. And then all of a sudden, bam.
Bam.
Yeah. They bring you back in.
Yes.
And you're being tried. And just long story short, they found Tim Hennis guilty of these murders.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, I think he did it.
Yeah.
I mean, he was pretty slick, and he got pretty good ways and got out of everything. But I think that was partly the prosecution's fault. Just for going overboard. But really, they didn't have a lot of stuff, and it wouldn't be for DNA, they never would have got him. If they wouldn't have took that vaginal swab, or if they wouldn't have kept that, that evidence secure, yeah, they would never would have got him.
Yeah, that's right. But he was tried at a Fort Bragg courthouse.
Yeah, they brought him in the Army. In the Army, justice does not have a price. We are going to get this done.
Yeah. But Gary Eastburn, he had to go back to court to see the Tim Hennis for a third time. He knew it wouldn't be easy.
Yeah.
And he was feeling anger toward Hennis and all this other emotions. I can't even imagine what he was feeling.
No. And they did. They put him, Hennis back on death row, but this death row was in
Leavenworth, Kansas.
Leavenworth, Kansas,
yeah.
yes. There's only like, 3 people
yeah.
on death row out there. But yeah, and it was, it's kind of sad. I mean, especially for Gary and the family. But when he showed him on the court steps outside, he's like, well, I'm not out here gloating. I'm sorry for his family and his kids. He said, but justice being served.
Yeah.
So he was happy, but he was very melancholy about it.
Mm-hmm. So at the time of all this, Tim Hennis going back on trial, Jana Eastburn, the surviving daughter of Katie,
right,
was 26 years old at the time.
Yeah.
And she was, having to be there for her father.
It is. She said it was kind of weird for her, the whole thing. I mean, I think she probably has some kind of survivor's guilt, but at the same time, she don't remember any of that. And she was so young, she don't really remember her mother or her sisters.
No.
So it's hard for her, like her dad would take her to the graves to see them and, to have feelings because she really don't know them. She's really the lady that he married in England is basically the only mother that she knows.
Yeah. That's right.
Poor Gary.
I mean, I can't even imagine, but, justice was eventually served.
Oh, yeah.
And Tim Hennis is trying to appeal this still to this day, trying to do something to get out of this. And his lawyers are saying, the stuff was mishandled. And Tim Hennis in court during this time, he played a trump card saying that him and Katie had consensual sex.
Yeah, did he say that, or did his lawyer just throw that out there?
I don't know if his lawyer threw that out trying to throw something at the wall to see if it'd stick.
He basically said that they had sex on a Tuesday before she was killed.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, dang, and said they didn't want to say that during the first trial because everything was already so bad and everything. He just didn't want to discredit her reputation or nothing as being, so basically now, and I think Gary's mad because basically now he called him a wife a whore. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And like, wait a damn minute. And I'm thinking, man, they were really trying to make her look bad. Even when he came over on a Tuesday. What, she didn't take a bath from Tuesday till she was killed Friday, or was it Thursday night? I think Thursday night. So you'd think, I don't know, just she would still have this swab.
And they were saying that Tim, his wife had just had a baby and she wasn't being affectionate toward him, and Katie's husband was out of town, so it just made sense for them to hook up and
have just trying to drag her down the road.
They drug Katie down the road trying to throw anything at her and get Tim off on this, but hell, he didn't beat it, man. Today he's on death row in Leavenworth, Kansas.
Yes. Yeah. They hadn't put anybody to death for like 50 years, but
from the military, yeah.
Yeah, but I think they hung that guy.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much the case of the Eastburn family murders, man.
It's crazy. Yeah, I think he is the only person to ever be on death row in the public sector and in and then be acquitted, and then he's on death row again, but he's under military terms.
Yeah. Crazy story.
It is.
Yeah. But that's the Eastburn family murders.
Wild story, man. Twists and turns.
Yeah.
As soon as you think it's over, it's not.
Yeah. You can find clips of all this online. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube about this you can watch, and we'll post pictures of this case and different things about it.
Yeah, maybe we'll drop a YouTube link for that one that just had the old news footage. I think that was
that was pretty good. It's like an hour long, but
you can tell it's old videotape footage because of the stuff in the screen, going around the I don't know what you call that, interference looking stuff.
Yeah, the tape might get messed up or something. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Like the tracking was off or something.
Yeah, could be tracking. That's when you had to go up there to the VCR and
roll a little wheel
to track the head on the tape. Yeah, I remember doing that. Yeah,
yep.
Pretty cool. But this case ain't cool, man.
No.
All right, bud, we're gonna get out of here, man.
All right, let's roll.
We want everyone to be safe. Please be careful and always be aware of your surroundings,
because the next episode could be about you.
This is
the
Crack House Chronicles.